Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Today, I have with me Sadie St. She's the founder and CEO at Women in Data. We're talking about emerging technology and the impact that has on data science. Sadie, I'd love to welcome you along to the show. I think last time we spoke, I was on your show, so appreciate you us reversing roles this time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's always fun to do a podcast swap. And I think the first time we met was on Clubhouse.
It
So
was, yeah.
another audio platform. So
It was. We've seamlessly bounced from Clubhouse to podcast studio. Well, I'm sure one time we'll meet in person, but travel's been restricted, hasn't it? So
yes, it has. And
see if it
I think
happens.
Clubhouse it will be really keen to this discussion. You know, it was a new emerging technology last
Yeah.
year, right? In 2021. And now I have yet to see much of it this year in 2022. So
Yeah, it emerged, and yeah, maybe it didn't stretch beyond that, but yeah, let's definitely get back into that. So, first off, I've done a one-liner of who you are, your name and your company, but yeah, do you want to just give a bit of background about you and who you are and the work you do?
yeah, happy to. The main thing that takes my time is running Women in Data. So we're an international nonprofit organization who's focused on increasing diversity in data careers. We do this through awareness, education, and advancement, and really just pinpoint to support our members at every stage of their career journey, whether it's they're trying to get into a career or they're looking to grow and lead in their career, and do this through a variety of programs. So I feel super blessed and honored to run this organization. We're represented in over 30 countries across the world, which is really incredible to be able to connect with people from all across the world with a common mission and purpose. And it's just exciting to be able to do something that has such a social impact on our world today. So that's the majority of my time. And then I also do love teaching. And so I've trained over 350,000 people in data science, mainly through my course on Coursera, SQL for Data Science. Also designed some machine learning courses. And then really just enjoying being an advocate for more people to get into the space, into data careers, helping businesses understand how to translate their data and make sure that they're bringing diverse and inclusive people in their teams.
Wow. Okay. So lots there. I mean, it's interesting. Sort of how we started talking, really, wasn't it? About kind of this idea that we've got to create a sort of workforce in data that represents the real world. That's the sort of diversity thing, and I so important. And I think the work you're doing globally sort of helps to shine a light on an element of diversity, at least, and gender diversity is a one that we can all focus on and get behind. But how did you get into all of this? Because I know that's sort of bit of education, bit of global kind of community development, some social impact. Is your sort of background been in sort of creating companies, or is it sort of been in the data science? How have you sort of got into this space?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of what I call slash careers, right? A lot of people, we've talked now all the time of like, oh, you don't have one career for 20 years, right? Where you have the same title and stay in your same lane forever. But I also believe we're not going to just do one thing. We're going to do multiple things. And we can get into that with, what happens when we start to use cryptocurrencies and blockchain for our work, and how we really do create a global economy that's diverse and scalable. But for me, yeah, I don't remember a time in my life I haven't had three different hats on. So that's just something that's really innate to me. But really, my technical background is in data science. So in 2014, I transitioned from working in a neuroscience lab to working in data science. And it was really through that transition of getting my master's and working full time at the same time that I just noticed the lack of diversity in the field. And data science was fairly new at that time. I think the term was about 3 years old, 3 or 4 years old. And so I figured that if we're starting off this way, the future of what this space looked like wasn't going to be that great. And also the space was going to grow incredibly in the future. And so I knew that in order for me to survive in the career path, I needed a community, but also really just had a vision of creating more equality and opportunity in the space. So I started Women in Data on the side while still working as a data scientist. That allowed me to grow and develop the community, but also allowed me to grow and do some really cool things in the tech space. So I went on to lead some data science teams. After that, I transitioned into consulting and had the opportunity to work with some really cool companies on their AI strategy. And then, during that time, also started teaching as well. So I really just look at the approach of like taking it by following like what I'm passionate about, what I'm good at, what the world needs, and what I can be paid to do, right? So a very ikigai approach to
Nice.
deciding where to spend my time. And that's led me to do some really fun things.
Well, fun. There's not a huge number of people that can sort of hit that sweet spot that you just the overlap of that Venn diagram you articulate there. So that's awesome. Well, I mean, you mentioned there about kind of you spotted, partly you set up Women in Data and the community because you kind of needed one. There wasn't one, you needed one. But also you mentioned there sort of about the kind of foresight you had that this space was going to grow. It was early, it was emerging, and you sort of got behind it and got into it for your own career, but also set something up that was necessary in order to advance that function, that cause. So I sort of almost turning to what we want to talk about, which is looking forward again. And in some ways, what we want to talk about in terms of emerging technologies, looking forwards. In other ways, it's here now. But it's going to evolve. It's going to iterate. So is there some technologies, some movements that are sort of exciting you that you're getting behind or you're aware of, kind of in this sort of emerging tech space that's sort of front of mind for you right now?
Yeah, so there's three terms that really come to mind. One is blockchain, the second is NFTs, and the third is the metaverse. And these are all actually really tightly
kind of connected, aren't they? Yeah.
Yeah. So I usually like to just define each of them for people in like a really simple term so that we can just all level set with like what we're talking about, right? So
holding a pen, scribbling some notes now then, if you're going to define this for me.
Yeah, it may change over time, but I really like to break things down to like the simplest form possible, right? So
really helpful.
When I think of the blockchain, it's really just a digital record, right? So what is a chain? The chain is that record that we're storing information on and we're storing data on, right? When you think of NFTs, we all know they're non-fungible tokens, right? But what does that actually mean? Well, NFTs really just represent ownership, right? And this can be representative of a digital asset. So the most well-known are JPEGs and pieces of art, right? But this can represent ownership of anything. You could show ownership of a document. You could show ownership even of a non-digital, of a actual good. A lot of luxury brands are now using NFT to show who owns it and if you want to resell it, where it goes. So NFTs, when I break it down, is really just in terms of ownership. And then all this builds up into creating the metaverse. And I think for me, what the metaverse is just a representation that more of our lives are going to be encapsulated in a digital space. And this looks a little bit differently based on who you're looking to define it, right? So, a lot of us have seen Meta's, or formerly Facebook's, definition of this. What they came out last year with Connect, and it was very VR driven. Coinbase has their own architecture for what the metaverse looks like. Then you get into the gaming side of things with Roblox, et cetera. They have their own definition of what this looks like. So this term of the metaverse is very new. But I think if you boil it all down, it's just saying that more of our lives are going to be caught in this digital space. And I think it's important to realize how much of our lives are already. I mean, you and I have never met in person, yet we know each other, right?
We've only met on the metaverse, basically.
Yes, we're in a small fraction of that. So how that will continue to grow and thrive, I think, will really be powered by things like the blockchain and how we have ownership and how we work.
Yeah, it's really interesting. All these things, as you say, they all connect and they support each other or drive each other, depending on how you look at it. And there's a danger always with emerging technology, emerging trends that things are badged as it, even though it's not really. So, as you say, we haven't really met in the metaverse. We've met online in a video conference platform. That's not the metaverse, but people are starting to call it these things, and I think it confuses people. about what these things are, what the opportunity is. And well, actually, I think that the biggest problem with it is it confuses what the opportunity is, because I think then you can get a bit blinded by, this is just something for somebody else to deal with, and actually, how do I get behind it? Are you seeing it's more than just trendy terms and sort of things for Mark Zuckerberg to play around with, and something that's really, really tangible and something that's going to sort of transform the way we do things? Or is it really just an extension of what we're currently doing and nothing more than that?
Yeah, so I really like to take a step back and look at history of like how rapidly things have changed, right? So on a day-to-day basis, our lives may not feel like they changed too much, minus the pandemic happening almost a few years ago, right? But other than that, on a day-to-day basis, we don't see our lives changing that much. It feels very gradual. But if we zoom back, it wasn't that long ago. What was it, 2008, the iPhone came out, right? So before that, we didn't even we weren't working from a mobile standpoint, right? And then you go back even 10 years, right, is when another 10 years prior, 10, 20 years prior to then, that was the internet, right? So you think about these things, like the internet has not even been around. I mean, the internet wasn't even around for me when I was born, so like that is a huge new technology that has come and totally revolutionized the way we do everything. So I think if we take a step back and look at, it's really not that much time that these factors have come into our life, and they're speeding up even more, right? You can go all the way back to, the first and second industrial revolutions, and third with steam engines. And that took a longer amount of time to span over. So when I see things like this coming up with like blockchain and NFTs in the metaverse, I think on a daily basis, we may not see it affecting our lives, but I think it's really important for us as data professionals to be paying attention to this, because all of a sudden we may wake up and be left behind. And when I look at this new technology, it's really going to change. One, it's a new data source for us. It potentially changes our business operations, which we all know is really important as professionals in this area to understand and know how to operate. But third, it creates new opportunity, right? In terms of how we create models, how we create insights, and how we deliver that back to the business. So I don't think these are trendy terms. I think that they're here to stay. And I think it's really important that whatever your area of expertise is, you start learning about these things so you can be prepared for the wave of change.
Well, what are some of those opportunities then? Because on the surface, when I think about it, is metaverse about the way we present dashboards? There'll be augmented reality on the wall in a meeting room, or is it more about, is the opportunity really about the kind of the change in the way people interact and behave, and the data, I suppose, that produces? Is that where the opportunity is for something like the metaverse? But where are you seeing some of those opportunities, I guess, more generally with those technologies, but then more specifically with how it impacts on our space, the data science space, in terms of what it would generally impact over time?
Yeah, so I definitely hope that the VR headset comes out where we can play with data and view dashboards. With the VR headset, I think it'd be really fun. I actually got an Oculus and used the art function in it a lot. And so it feels like data should be a part of it. So I think that's one aspect, but I think from that aspect, we're looking at it too much from like our own of like how it's going to benefit me and my job and what my job is today, and keeping my job the same, right? I think where this is really going to change things is how businesses operate. And at the end of the day, the data is just a reflection of how a business operates. So that changes what we're analyzing, right? It changes the systems we need to bring into our data architecture, right? It changes the products that are being delivered. It changes the insights, because now let's say you're a consumer goods company and you start selling digital goods, right? Well, before you had a production span of 6 to 12 months to create those things, selling a digital good does not take that long. So how does that change your model? What more can you learn from your consumers because of it, right? So I think, definitely hope that we are able to play with data with a VR headset, but I think it's really in terms of our data sources, our business operations, and the products and services we're delivering to our customers.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing, is it, with if this really data is about, as you say, a reflection. The insight that we need is it should be a reflection of the business that that it's working for, that it's generating insight for. And if that business changes, the insights that needed a change, and also to help with that transition. So as you say, in like a retailer, for example, it might change the type of consumer. It might pivot completely the age demographic that interacts with the brand. It might change the kind of products that they buy. So that, as you say, that innately sort of changes, therefore, the data science work that we need to do alongside the business model change. So in a way, if it's simply just, as you say, it's just a reflection of what we currently do, but in online, then that's almost not kind of capturing the opportunity quite as much as we can.
Yeah, and I think this is where the term Web3 comes in really well in representing and kind of encapsulating all of these terms, right? Which is like Web 1 was you could read, Web 2, which people say we're currently living in, was you could read and write. So you could read things on the internet, but you can also publish and share and do that. As we move into Web 3, we can read, write, and own, right? So that's really talking about like NFTs showing ownership, blockchain, that record of it. So when you think about each of those areas of the internet, Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, all of those changed how our businesses operate. It created new businesses. I think we're going to see that same thing emerge as well here.
Yeah, and you mentioned it before, we've had an explosion of data. This is sort of exponential in terms of what it does, because the more you interact digitally, the more data that sort of generates. So that creates some opportunity for more good analysis and more data sets, but I guess also some opportunity, some challenge with how you grapple with that and make sure you're capturing it in the right way and doing the right things with it.
Yeah, and I think it also really not only like what's the insights, but also what are the algorithms we're producing. So as you said, the explosion of data is going to be exponential. I think I felt like we were already on the exponential curve, so I don't know what's after
that. Yeah.
Right? We just all blow up. I hope not, right? That's not the goal there. But I think that's now when we're really going to see companies truly adopting AI, because there won't be enough people to do this work. We're going to heavily depend on models to be able to automate a lot of these things and provide these predictions. So it's really cool to see all these things emerging in one.
Do you think we'll be able to put the right guardrails in place to make sure that doesn't sort of spin out of control? Because there's already lots of work around ethics and ensuring sort of equality in outcome with the way AI sort of produces results and the way it interacts with sort of real life. With this kind of acceleration again into sort of even more digital, and metaverse is actually quite a hard concept to sort of make happen, because and there'll probably be multiple metaverses, to be fair, but there's a danger that actually more data, more AI equals less control, more difficult to sort of keep your arms around society and keep it on the straight and narrow, frankly. Do you think there's a danger there? Is there not and also is there an obligation for the, I suppose, data and data science community to make sure that we create a world that doesn't just replicate what we've had before in this new way, but does something even better?
I think the opportunity for us as data professionals is to educate. So there is no way we are going to be able to fully control the ethics of this, right? What we need to do is help educate the general population on how their data is being used, what these algorithms are, so they can be better informed consumers. Because at the end of the day, it's the consumer choices that are going to change the policies and really change what we're doing. So, are we going to do it right? No, I think anytime we do new things, right, we don't know what we're stepping into. So I'm sure where there's going to be mistakes made, but I think the more that we can help educate people, provide awareness to how information is being used, how algorithms work, so that they can be informed, critical thinkers to make the best decisions for their own life, that's when we see massive change at scale.
Yeah, support as much as we can to generate better outcomes and using this stuff in the right way. And I think the guardrails, I think, is an interesting one. And with I think you mentioned there's sort of data sharing, with the world grapples with that at the moment, and there's some good regulation, and there's some limited regulation that exists depending on what country you're in, around sort of ensuring good sort of access and control of how your data is used. And even things just like, how good services like Amazon, do people, there's a good exchange of value there, isn't there, between what you get from using Amazon and the data that you share. But there's a danger, there's a worry, there's a concern for me about the sort of proliferation and the difficulty you'll have to sort of contain who has access to what, and who has control of your data and what you opt in for. And again, it's going to be exponentially harder to make that happen. But as you say, it's really about education. It's about ensuring that we put the right controls in place, the right guardrails in place to ensure that doesn't happen.
Yeah, because we need people from all sides from all industries having this awareness, right? We need lawyers who have this awareness so that they can help drafting the right policies. We need, our policymakers and elected officials, right? We need consumers and voters and people who pick things. So it's so much more than ourselves, where I think that data scientists and professionals, should speak up, right? But at the end of the day, if your boss or the CEO says, hey, we need to do this because this is going to make us a lot of money, you may not have that voice. So where is your voice? Your voice can be used to help educate those policymakers, to help educate lawyers, to help educate the general public. And that, I think, we're going to see a lot more progress if we take that approach of an educative approach, than actually just a one person trying to make a change.
Yeah, it's I know you do a lot of work in supporting sort of grassroots and educating people and supporting people's development. This stuff is so sort of new and emerging, and some people are still trying to get their heads around, building sort of basic models to bring a couple of data sets together. How do people start to get on the front foot with this stuff? Is it sort of bury your head until it becomes a reality for people and more mainstream, or is there really sort of worthwhile getting in front of it now, understanding it, getting involved with it, trying it, buying NFTs, getting into cryptocurrency, these things that people should be doing or reading about or researching, or is it a bit of sit and wait for a little bit until it becomes a little bit more mainstream?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely opportunity to get into it now. And I really try and stay away from like recommending when I'm not, and I don't give investment advice, right? I never will. And I'm saying, hey, go into cryptocurrencies. And I think that's the reason why a lot of people have shied away, is because there's a financial component to it, right? Yeah. And so that may be a risk that people don't want to take. That's a personal decision. But more importantly, there's so much more opportunity to be in this space, besides having like a financial component. Like what really got me into it is I started creating art during the pandemic, and that's just abstract art with painting with acrylics. But then when I saw that digital art was being sold, I thought, oh, this is really cool. It's blending two of my loves, which is art and then technology. And so for me, that was like my gateway, right, into this space. And so from there, like I was able to go to some meetups, meet some people working in the space, start working on some projects with them. And it just like, it starts opening up all these doors and opportunities. So what I recommend for people is like, find it. There's so many aspects in this space that you can get into. I mean, if you're really into gaming, like getting a headset and starting with some of the gaming opportunities is a great space, but like find that area that you're passionate about and then add in that emerging technology, connect, network with people, and really just start working on a project, because that's really going to be your best way to learn.
I tell you the thing that got me to sort of understand the enormity of what could come, particularly with the metaverse, was my kids going to a Ariana Grande concert on oh god, I forget the name of the game that they go on, one of the game platforms that they're onto Fortnite. That was it.
Oh yes, yes, yes.
And just the kind of sort of and I mean it was great. I mean he went and met some mates, you know, and they went to the concert together. It was all on screen, and just sort of it clicked to me how this is just going to be normal for a whole bunch of people. A whole generation of people are just going to sort of get used to and interact with this way. I watched them, you know, interact with their mates online through lockdown, which, you know, yes, we had phones in the old days that we would have used, but they were interacting, they were collaborating, they were building things, they were you know, gaming together, they were solving problems together, all through the medium of, as you say, headsets and screens and games. And the enormity of sort of what that sort of meant when they went to that concert with their friends, just all online. It just kind of like, you know, so that's one way. That is one way that I got educated, was seeing it for real. And it's kind of can be quite easy to sort of go, oh no, that's not for me. But the sort of it will impact, right? It will impact, and it's great that there's some avenues that people can start to dabble with now. As you say, it doesn't necessarily involve buying a bunch of Bitcoin or Ethereum or something, which as you say, neither of us are qualified to advise on.
Yeah, and I'm so happy you mentioned the example with your children. I think that's a perfect example, because I mean, you know, maybe our parents felt the same back in the day when we got the internet, right? And we're like, okay, this is just this thing. I don't even, maybe it worries me a little bit. I don't know what they're looking up or what they're doing on there. And yet today, that's our whole world of how we work. And I think it's really important to look at kids, especially with what's happened with the pandemic and like most all education going online for a little while, right? Like there's this whole space and time that they become adapted to this. And you know, now it's where they play. And I noticed it when in Oculus, you can go into this space to just like meet random people in a virtual world. And I read on the reviews prior to going in, like, I thought kids weren't allowed in here, right? And then I go into the space and there's a bunch of kids, and you can tell they're kids just because they're talking about like McDonald's and the funny things that kids talk about, right? So I think it's important to realize like the upcoming generations, like how immersed already they are in these worlds. And so how this flood is just going to take on a lot faster.
Yeah, and just on the other one is what they buy. I mean, they buy skins, they buy these digital assets, and with their real, you know, with their real money that they've got from pocket money, and they buy digital stuff, and they are excited by that, and they've won, you know, they've essentially won something, but it's so disposable. That's the kind of scary thing. It's so, you know, got it, gone sort of thing. And I suppose it's not too different from when you buy them a physical gift, but but they're just growing up with this you know, digital ownership, and buying things that aren't physical. So really interesting. But I wouldn't mind just sort of finishing up with you know, just bring it back to almost your day job around sort of diversity. And I kind of got two schools of thought about life in the metaverse and life online, and its impact on diversity. Because on one hand, you've got a, you know, almost a shield, an avatar that you're a persona that you're acting as it within the kind of digital space, which in some ways could mean that your sort of real diversity is, or diversity is sort of less important. But on the other hand, you've got this avatar and this persona in front of you, so therefore it's even more important that your attributes, your facets, and that we care even more about diversity to make sure that we don't inadvertently or subconsciously sort of create a less diverse digital world than we've created in the physical world. So where do you sit on that? Is diversity more important? I think I probably can guess your answer. Or is it less important when it comes to kind of having this sort of digital avatar online?
Yeah, I think there's some opportunities with it, right? With a digital avatar, you can really be whoever you want. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity there. I think it's kind of shows just the opening of our own mindsets and our own evolution as a society of just, you know, kind of choosing your identity and having that easily represented there. So I think that's a positive. I think where we're going to see the impact is where we're seeing it in most emerging new technologies, which is who is getting access to this information to be able to work with it and create a better life with it for themselves. So, you know, you can look at this in emerging countries and looking at it from a country aspect, right, of who gets technology and is able to use it and advance with it. But then you can also look at it from a gender and racial aspect as well, which, you know, we've seen similar to what I saw when data science was emerging was, hey, you know, it's coming out and it's going to be big, and there's a lot of opportunity in this economically for people to have good jobs. And it wasn't evenly spread. That awareness wasn't evenly spread up across all groups. And so that's where my concern is with this in terms of diversity, is just who's getting access to this technology, not from a consumer standpoint, right? Because we can always use people to sell stuff to, right? And that usually everybody gets access to that. But who's using it, getting the technology to be able to build, to create, and economically benefit from it?
Yeah, that's the inclusion thing, and making sure there's sort of equal opportunity. And, you know, of course, money talks in this space. And, you know, if you've got sort of the major players sort of owning the space, then that automatically, in some ways, kind of it creates an environment where it's not equal. And you know, I guess we've got to learn from where this has gone wrong before. There's loads of stories around how AI sort of picked up bias from how humans have been in the real world and sort of extrapolated those out and then made some really terrible decisions off the back of it. And we've got to not. That's what I was talking about before in terms of guardrails. Really, you know, how do we prevent or stop ourselves from doing that, and make sure there's sort of fairly equal access and return from this brilliant opportunity, which is, again, it's quite finite at the moment, isn't it? There's a certain group of people that are engaging with these things, certain group of people that are buying NFTs, a certain group of people that are able to engage in the metaverse because headsets are expensive. And, you know, we can easily sleepwalk into a world where it's not diverse.
Yeah. And I think, like, you know, again, using history to learn from past mistakes of like, okay, where did we go awry previously and how can we make changes for that this time? And so, you know, just really keen to, my rule is like, once you learn something, make sure that you like turn around and teach it right away. So, you know, I kind of went on this journey of learning about NFTs and blockchain and the metaverse. And it's like, okay, now I have to go around to teach this, right? Yeah. So share. I think if we all kind of take that approach and making sure that then who we're sharing it with and teaching it with are diverse audiences, we can start to make a change in this space.
Yeah, well, let's do it. I mean, I've learned loads just by talking to you about it in prep for this, and then again in discussion. So yeah, that journey started, and obviously as this gets pushed out, that will work. And no, I hugely appreciate you coming on the show. I love the work that you're doing. Super important. I love hanging out with you and talking about all the things that you're doing. So really appreciate you coming on the show. Thank you very much for doing that, Sadie.
Yeah, my pleasure. It's always great chatting with you.
Cool. And thanks everyone for listening. I hope you've learned something great from this and inspired to go and research blockchain, NFTs, metaverse, Web3, crypto, lots of the emerging trends and technologies. So hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll catch you again soon.